There you go.
Okay, and then we're going to share the screen.
Yes,
Okay, I'm going to switch it over.
I think so. I apologize. There you go.
No, there, good. Good.
Dobra.
Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. I know you're in Michigan. I'm out in San Francisco Bay Area. It's only middle of the afternoon for me, but I appreciate your sharing your dinner hour with me. And we're gonna talk about the curious history of ice cream. And I want to, this will last about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. And afterwards we'll have time for some questions. So if you're all muted, maybe you can feel free to put some questions in the chat and we can move along. But there is a reason that ice cream is on my mind, and that is because of these books. It's a series called the Cape Cod Creamery, and on the left is the Sweet Life that we released a year ago, and on the right we have the Secret to Happiness that just came out in a few months ago. And kind of fun news is the Sweet Life has had its film rights optioned. So whether or not it'll actually hit the big screen, we don't know, but it's kind of exciting just to even get that far. So, and this is a series. There's actually a third book in the series already written, already into the editor's hands, already been approved. And it's now in what I call the back of the house where they're doing the line by line editing. And it's called the Love on a Whim. Don't have a cover yet, but it's, I think, a really good wrap up to the series, because that's not easy to sort of have a big story arc that brings everything together and kind of lands that plane. But at the same time, each book is very self-standing and kind of fun. Okay, moving along. So this series is about a mom and a daughter who started an ice cream shop on Cape Cod, and both of them had kind of some bumps and bruises and needed a little bit of respite in life. So they end up on Cape Cod because, in fact, the mom is walking down the street early one morning and sees this broken down old ice cream shop. And she just, on a whim, puts a lowball offer because it's up for sale. Somehow she gets it and she's so excited. And the daughter is just horrified because they have no experience whatsoever in the food industry. But the mom thinks, it's going to be easy because who doesn't love ice cream? Everybody loves ice cream. And it's true, ice cream is wonderful, but it can be tricky. And I say this with some authority because of my husband. My husband, Steve, is a serious ice cream maker, really, really serious. He is a serious guy to begin with. And so we call his ice cream Steve Serious Ice Cream. He while he was working on his vanilla recipe, he worked on it 59 times before he got it right. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but other flavors like chocolate or mocha, or let's say lemon, strawberry, mint, they can all mask the maybe inferior raw ingredients. They can mask the ice cream maker's flaws or errors, but not vanilla. Vanilla is so pure that it really is the hardest flavor to make. It's full of integrity. And I probably have just ruined all other flavors of ice cream for you, but at least learned a little something about vanilla. And I wonder if you knew where all the ice cream greats got their start. And I'm including my husband in this. And I'm talking about, Baskin and Robbins, and Ben and Jerry's and Jenny's, and probably regionally, I'd love to hear some of your ice cream specialty shops up where you are, because they all attended Penn State's ice cream school. I wonder if any of you knew there was such a thing. Penn State has an ice cream school in January for obvious reasons. They've been holding it since 1892, every single year except for the pandemic. They have held ice cream school, and they have this long course that is for serious professionals, and they have a short course for really intense hobbyists like my husband. And a few years ago, I sent my husband and my daughter, who is a nutritionist, back to Penn State's ice cream school, and they came back as kind of mad scientists. And this is now our family thing, is making ice cream. And our popularity has increased magnificently because of it. We get invited to a lot more events and dinners. But with all that background, now let's move on to why you're here, ice cream. And the truth is, there are several myths about when ice cream actually began. You know, no one really can know for certain, and most likely the ice cream of ancient history would bear very little resemblance to the ice cream that we eat today. But, oh, sorry, I went too far. The very first mention of a frozen dessert dates back to Persia in 550 BC, which is amazing. And they had this invention called a yakchol, and it was a type of refrigeration. And ice cream is all about refrigeration. So the Persians enjoyed something called a sharbat, which might be sort of close to what we think of as a sherbet. It is made of sugar and water and flavoring. And they had sugar because they were, even way back then, they were already trading with the Indian Empire. Well, there is a biblical passage in the book of Proverbs that talks about a cold flavored drink during harvest with King Solomon. And as we're kind of moving along in history, we have Emperor Nero, who was a horrible person, horrible. He actually sent his slaves up into the hills, and they would bring back snow, and he would have that served for his guests for dinner, flavored with honey and wine. And one thing Nero did right, and I think it's the only thing he did right, he actually stored the ice in deep pits covered with straw. And that practice of keeping ice would be common for centuries, even up to now. This is how ice is often kept in rural areas. Well, then there are those who insist that ice cream came out of China. And there's some references in ancient writings to a milk and a rice dish that was found in China in 200 BCE. And it's thought that ice cream would have been brought then to Europe with the help of Marco Polo. We see in Italy how ice cream is really taking root, and you can think of ice cream and gelato and Italy. And in 1565, the architect Bernardo Buontalenti invented this advanced refrigeration technique. And so now ice cream could be commonly consumed by Italians throughout the Renaissance. So much so that in the early 1600s, Catherine de' Medici held a competition for new and unique dishes to be presented at court. We're moving east now onto Russia, where we're in the late 1700s. We have Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia. She was so in love with ice cream that she had this special ice cream service set made out of this elegant Sèvres porcelain. And it's so exquisite. You can actually go online and see the actual porcelain. We're going to go a little southwest to Turkey, where Turkish chefs have been making ice cream for over at least 300 years. They had something made from flour milled with wild orchids, and they called it dondurma. And regardless of its origins, we do know, I'm stuck there, that a love of ice cream has been around in the old world for a very, very long time. So let's turn our attention now to the new world and how ice cream jumped the pond. It's impossible to say exactly which port of entry that ice cream came in to the new world, but very likely came in through England with the Quaker colonists. And the reason that this was thought, and this would have been in the 1700s, there were several books on confectionaries that were produced at this time, and they had recipes for both what they called ices and then ice creams. And of course, the Quakers are out of England. A lot of people confuse them with the Amish who came out of Europe, but the Quakers were out of England. Well, others argue that it was the French, because the French are oh so cool, and they would have brought ice cream to America through probably some of the other lower ports, through not just New York, but maybe Philadelphia as well. And frankly, they're both probably right, because there were so many immigrants flooding the new world at that point. But one thing we do know for sure, that ice cream was really just a dessert for the wealthy. And there's a number of reasons we can make that assumption. One, it required money to own a cow or maybe even two cows because you had to have surplus, you know, cream for beyond what your family needed, but also to use for ice cream. It required large quantities of sugar, and that was an imported commodity. It also required salt, which was also imported. And making ice cream required ice, which meant that it had to be cut on a river and hauled into an ice house with the hopes that it would still be there in the summer. And most Americans did not have the luxury of an ice house, nor did they have the luxury of the kind of time that ice cream took to make what they would have considered a frivolous dish. But we do know for sure of one American who loved ice cream, and that was George Washington. He loved it so much that he even brought all his ice cream equipment from Mount Vernon to the Capitol when he was president. And there are many accounts of ice cream being served during his administration, as well as a lot of inventory records from Mount Vernon that have that show he owned several ice cream pots, they called it, made of tin and pewter. And there's this interesting story of a New York merchant who confided to a New York newspaper that George Washington had spent over $200 in his store in ice cream during one summertime, which would be the equivalent of $5,000 in today's economy. Isn't that amazing? We have another American who loved ice cream. This is Thomas Jefferson. And it's said that he had so many ice houses, he could hold up to 62 wagon loads of ice, which would lead to a lot of ice cream. And Thomas Jefferson had a chef named James Hemings, whom he sent all the way to France to be trained. And this was the first time in the New World that the Americas had a French trained chef, like literally trained in France to be back in the United States. Well, something kind of interesting, this chef brought back macaroni and cheese, whipped cream, and vanilla ice cream. And his name I mentioned was James Hemings. And if that just sort of tickles the back of your head in some way, it's because James Hemings was an enslaved man, and he had a younger sister named Sally Hemings, who was the enslaved concubine for Jefferson and bore him 4. Dolly Madison, big lover of ice cream. She served it at her husband's inaugural ball, James Madison, in 1813. At this time, most flavors that were popular would have been the soft fruits like strawberries or peaches, and they would be added to a vanilla custard. But Dolly Madison loved oyster ice cream, and that's what she served. How about that? Savory. Abraham and Mary Lincoln loved ice cream. They, before and during his presidency, they would frequently host strawberry parties for their friends in both Springfield, Illinois, as well as in the White House. And they would celebrate berry season with fresh, ripe strawberries over cake, and then you guessed it, over ice cream. And before we move forward into history, I want to move back a little bit, a couple of decades, and we're heading over to Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, there was a housewife named Nancy Johnson, who just must have been one of those kinds of people that could figure out a better way to do something, because she created this simple hand-cranked ice cream churn. And she filed a patent for it. And would you believe this is the same structure that is still used today? And the other thing Nancy Johnson did that I think is just so interesting is that she really changed ice cream by making it now affordable for everyone, because it didn't take a full day to make. I just think that's so interesting when you find someone who just finds a better way, and they do it, and they just change their whole world around them. Well, with this churn of Nancy Johnson's, the American love affair with ice cream was off and running. In fact, America's oldest brand of ice cream is called Bassett's, which is based in Philadelphia, started in 1861. I just have a funny feeling there's a link between Bassett's and Nancy Johnson, but I haven't uncovered it yet. But as this wide availability of ice cream was now, running through the states, there was all kinds of different inventions that would come about, such as the ice cream soda, and with it, the soda jerk, which was actually considered a profession. And they would just add, carbonation to some ice cream. But there was a kickback to this, which probably sounds funny. It's a legend. I don't know if it's really true. Oh, sorry. But it's the fact that there was religious criticism for eating sinfully rich ice cream in a soda on Sunday. And so the ice cream merchants just left out the carbonated water and reinvented it in the late 1890s as kind of the ice cream sundae, spelled differently. And this just removed any connection to the Sabbath whatsoever. If that's really true, I don't know. That's what I seem to have uncovered. But I have always wondered why it's spelled differently. Well, here's another invention that came about this time. I don't know if you've ever heard of a black cow, also known as a root beer float. But this came about as a man named Frank Wisner was the owner of a brewery in Colorado called the Colorado's Cripple Creek Brewery. And he created the root beer float, or the black cow, after looking out the window and realizing that the snowy peaks of what is called Cow Mountain just reminded him of ice cream floating in a soda. And he then turned it into the most popular. I love this, the ice, the root beer float. And I wanted to just keep that in mind, that a brewery had something to do with this, because we're going to talk about that in a second. But by the end of the 1800s, ice cream was so common and so popular at this point that any urban area would have had these little street vendors pushing maybe like the push carts or a little kiosk to ice creams right on the street. And they would sell them in these little glass containers called a penny lick. And just like it sounds, for the price of a penny, you could have some licks of ice cream. Well, the customers would, clean out the penny lick with their licking, and then hand it back to the vendor, who hopefully would sanitize it, but not always. And it wasn't long before penny licks were completely banned from city streets because of concerns about the spread of tuberculosis and cholera. And just a tip, if you go on eBay, you will see these antique penny licks, which are kind of fun just to see. Well, this brings us up to the ice cream cone. And as legend has it, it came out of the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904. There were two concessionaires side by side, and one sold ice cream and one made hot waffles that he would sell right there on the spot. And the ice cream vendor ran out of the paper containers that he used for his customers. And the waffle concessionaire looked over, saw the dilemma that his neighbor was in, took a warm waffle, wrapped it up like a cylinder, and handed it over to him. And there it is, the very first edible container for ice cream. Well, if you remember, I mentioned something about a brewery. As prohibition laws banned alcohol in the 20s, a lot of breweries were converted to making ice cream. And I don't know whether that had to do with just the requirements of business, of food sanitation, but this was not uncommon. In fact, my son-in-law recently showed me a beer he was drinking, kind of an artisanal beer that had been made in an ice cream factory that had once been a brewery and was now back to making beer. But anyway, kind of interesting. And in the Ellis Island, around the same time, the newly arrived immigrants were given an ice cream sandwich in their first meal, just to kind of give them a taste of the finer things in American culture. This I kind of apologize for because it's going to stick in your head. But that phrase, "I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream," it comes from a song written by a trio in 1927. It's been around that long. Well, what do you think happened to ice cream during the Great Depression? I will tell you. Rocky Road. It was originally marketed as kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to cope with the economic crash. And as we move into World War II, where times of rationing, and of course, ice cream would have been really sought after and probably rare, and it became this important morale booster for the troops. In fact, each branch of the military tried to outdo each other in serving ice cream to its troops. In fact, in 1945, the first floating ice cream parlor was built for sailors in the Western Pacific. But something kind of fun is that American bombers would actually strap buckets of cream to the bottom of their planes when they would do flyovers or even, flew over enemy territory, and they would bring back the frozen cream for their troops. Well, as the World War II comes to an end, rationing is now over, and you can imagine, it's hard to believe, but just imagine the joy and the almost indulgence people have as now things are available to them that weren't. And by 1946, Americans were consuming over 20 quarts of ice cream per person. So I want you to think about that, 20 quarts per person. So what do you think the average American eats today? And I just want you to notice that we changed from quarts to pounds, just to give you a hint. And you're welcome to put it in the chat if you want to. Would you believe the average American eats 23 pounds of ice cream every year? And just a few years ago, that statistic was 22 pounds. So we are definitely moving in the upward. And compare that to 1946, right after World War II, where you had people eating 20 quarts per year. Amazing. Today, a staggering 9% of American cows' milk production is just dedicated just to ice cream. And the average cow can produce about 7,500 gallons of ice cream. That's how much milk she will produce, not ice cream. Well, everybody has a favorite brand, and it's usually regional, but the majority of these ice cream flavors have been around, or ice cream companies have been in business for more than 50 years. And something kind of wonderful is that they're actually, many of them are, if not most, are still owned by single families. I don't know if you've ever heard of an ice cream company named Salt and Straw on the West Coast. It started up in Portland. It's now kind of laced down the coast, but they started with bone marrow ice cream. Isn't that amazing? They are so popular that it's literally a line out the door from the minute they open to the minute they close at night, late at night. I've been there, I've seen it, it's amazing. And they do a lot of seasonal flavors that are really unique, really weird, and somehow they are able to pull it off. For example, during Thanksgiving, they will have a flavor made up of turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, and cranberry sauce. And I don't know how they do it, but it actually tastes good. It's just really fun. And I'd love to hear if you have some places like that near you. In Italy, not unlike over here in the US, there's 19,000 gelaterias, kind of similar to those ice cream parlors like Salt and Straw. They employ almost 70,000 people. And just like the US, many of them are owned by small family-owned businesses. But ice cream isn't just for Americans or for Italians. It's all over the world. We've got, gelato in Italy. Japan has mochi, and India has kulfi. Just slight variations. This sweet stuff just gets around. And before I sign off, I want to do a little trivia game with some of you. So grab your spoon and dig in. And I don't know if some of you are working on the chat. Let me see if the chat's up. Be fun to just see. So what I'm going to put a question out there, and you are welcome to add your 2 cents and see whether you know this answer or not. First of all, do you know what is the most popular flavor around the world? The entire world loves this. Okay, there's the chat. Well, clearly we have a very bright group, because yes, vanilla is the most popular flavor in the world. And here's the next question. Do you know the difference between gelato and ice cream? Waiting just to see if anyone's typing. Gelato has no milk? No, but you might like this answer. Gelato contains 1/3 less sugar and half the fat of ice cream. That's the difference. When we lived in Texas, when I was a new mother, there was a brand that's still very popular called Bluebell. And at the time, the butterfat content was 22%. That is a lot. I think it's less now, but that is a lot. But that's the difference between Americans and Italians, I think. Okay, next question. How many gallons of milk does it take to make 1 gallon of ice cream? You guys are amazing. 3 gallons. You have done this quiz. 3 gallons of whole milk. Think of that poor little cow trying to give her all. So you're exactly right. And now this one, I bet I will stump you. What country consumes the most ice cream per capita with an average of 7.5 gallons per person? Vicky says France. Betsy, do you have an idea? You're getting all the right answers. Japan. Italy. Okay, are you ready? New Zealand. New Zealand. Isn't that amazing? They are, it's the world of extreme sports, and somehow they eat more ice cream than any place else in the world. They're at 7.5 gallons per person. So what country do you think would be second, consuming the second most amount of ice cream per person? And I'll give you a hint. This one is 5.5 gallons per person. Australia. Yeah, you guys are right. The United States, 5.5 gallons per person, which is a lot, but think of New Zealanders, it's a lot less than the New Zealanders. But I do want you to think about a Ben and Jerry's pint and line up 44 of them in your house. That's a lot of ice cream. Okay, next question. Is an ice cream headache a real thing? Yes or no? Heather, all caps. Vicky says no. We have 2 Vickies. It is a real thing. An ice cream headache is a real thing, and it can be painful. And it is set off when an unusually cold substance passes over your palate and down your throat, and that causes the size of blood vessels to change rapidly. And that is what causes a brain freeze or an ice cream headache, and it hurts. Okay, next question. According to NASA, ice cream is one of the 3 foods that astronauts miss the most when they're on space missions. What do you think the other 2 are? And I will give you a hint that one of the 2 is a beverage. I love all your answers. Pop, chocolate, coffee, milk. Okay, you pretty much have it. Close. I'm surprised no one got pizza. Pizza and soda. And ice cream. They miss ice cream. Okay, last couple of questions. Did you know, actually, do you know what is National Ice Cream Month? Got the whole summer out here, but it's actually July. And this came about in 1984 when President Ronald Reagan, who had a sweet tooth, signed a proclamation that declared it as National Ice Cream Month. Did you know this? I'm just going to throw out there because I think this is just kind of an interesting one. I want you to think back to Nancy Johnson and her churn. Did you know that about 50% of the volume of ice cream is air, just air? And that's what gives the frozen dessert its light texture. So think of that automatic churn, or that, now it's automatic, but it used to, that hand crank that Nancy Johnson came up with. That's all it was doing, was giving it air. Okay, last question. What do you think happens during a times of economic recession? What happens to ice cream? Does it sales go up or sales go down? You're all right. They all go up. Ice cream is recession proof. So if you ever have a desire to have an ice cream shop, you should feel free to do it. Start it during a recession. Okay, well, before I wrap this up and turn this over, I just want to put out there that you are invited to go to my website and stay in touch. I've got a free gift for you if you go to SuzanneWoodsFisher.com/gift, and it is the actual recipe of Thomas Jefferson's vanilla that was brought back from France, which is kind of fun. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over, and we have time for some questions if you have any.
So yeah, there are some questions in chat.
Okay.
Let's see. My coworker loves to ask questions.
Oh, good.
So let's see. Oh, are you a quote collector? Where
Yes.
do you, oh good. She asked, where do you get the quotes for the chapter headings? Are they real or are they created for each story?
Okay, I love that she knows that, because every chapter in the book has a quotation that I researched heavily to find and make sure it was accurate, that actually fits with the chapter. And that's what was so hard to do. It's one thing to kind of throw a quote up there, but every single quote really has like a, it sort of just blends in really well. So I do collect them and I look for them. I'm working on flower novellas now, a book that's due, and I'm doing the same thing with flowers, where I'm just collecting all kinds of interesting quotes about flowers.
That's cool. What, you write several different genres. What is your favorite? Amish, contemporary, whatever, that kind of stuff.
It's almost like asking your favorite child, it's sort of whatever you're working on is so near and dear to your heart, because you're fully immersed and just living in that world and the characters. And because I'm working this flower story and I have a main character named Jamie, and I was playing tennis with a friend named Julie, and I keep calling her Jamie all morning yesterday. I think it's hard to separate reality and all, but I mean, I love learning. I just have an insatiable curiosity, and it's so fun to just plunge in deeply. So whether that's a historical novel is fascinating. I'm thinking about Nancy Johnson and whether there's anything I could create out of her story. And then I think writing contemporary is refreshing and kind of fun. But then I have to say, I go to the Amish and I write about the old order Amish. Largely, I got started because my grandfather was raised plain. So I have a family connection. And there's something so kind of calming about entering that world. And it doesn't mean they don't have problems. And even as I try to write the story to create really something that's going to make you turn a page, it's something sort of, they have a rightness that sort of settles into the book that I really love. Your sort of whole cell settles a bit.
Let's see. She also asks, how do you, well, she says, what was the last hunch that you had? Was it a hit or a miss? I'm assuming maybe in a story, if that makes sense, or character names, how do you pick them?
Okay, so are there two questions there? Or
Yeah, it's two.
two questions. Okay, so a hunch. Well, okay, I'll tell you something funny. In fact, I'm going to go back to the very first, if you don't mind. I'm going to go back to, I don't want to give everyone, close your eyes for a second. I don't want to give everybody epilepsy, but I want to show you the covers again. And I could probably do this in a little better way. Sorry if I'm, no. Okay, sorry, I don't want to stop sharing this screen. Okay, so here we are. Here we are. Okay, sorry about that. Very first slide. So my publishing house, the Sweet Life is all about ice cream, like all about ice cream. And somehow when I was sent the cover, they sent the popsicles to me. And I remember thinking, huh, I don't quite figure, that was hard for me to understand. It's a great cover, I love it. But what does it have to do with ice cream? So I went back to them and kind of said that I love it, but I don't feel like it fits the book. So I played a hunch, and they kind of were embarrassed. They loved the cover so much when it came up as popsicles, they didn't even think about it. So we liked the cover, and I said, if you can just get me ice cream for cover 1, when we get to cover 2, I will write a book about popsicles. And so that's what has happened. So that's one of my hunches, and that's behind the scenes of the writing life, which shows you lots of real people. Don't romanticize it. But and then the second question I'm forgetting was
Characters. How do you come up with the character names?
I know this may sound so funny, but you just kind of you kind of start collecting names, almost like quotes, just like I was actually even looking at shoes on Zappos the other day, and there were some interesting and Italian names. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to put like some of these aside and think of them for a character. But you just, and the thing is, you get attached, so you almost have to really start your story with that name, because it's really hard to switch.
Yeah, I would think so. Vicky asked, when is the third Cape Cod Creamery book coming out?
Thank you for asking, Vicki. It's coming out in late April of next year. And I mentioned its title is Love on a Whim. And I've never had love in a title before. My working title was On a Whim, and they put love on it. So I'm hoping it's going to appeal to people. There's a lot of love in it, but I just wasn't sure if that's going to work or not, but I think it will.
So I remember you said, and everyone got this question right, the vanilla is the most popular flavor. And really that's one of the last ones I ever pick. Although I like it with toppings or something on it, chocolate or something like that. But in the Sweet Life, you have so many kinds of ice cream in there, and the vanilla as the base, but then there's the lemon pomegranate with molasses and ginger lemongrass. Did your husband make all those flavors?
He did the vanilla and he does do some really good flavors, but it's hard for him to kind of like really push himself too far with these unique flavors. So I instead did research and studied recipes and went to different little shops in the Bay Area, because there's so much around here. And that's where I kind of came up with different flavors that are really fun. But my husband, not to throw him under the bus, because he does some incredible ice cream. He makes a salted caramel that is so delicious. The whole house just smells so good when he's making it. Oh, speaking of vanilla, I have an assignment for you. I would love for you all to, next time you're at the grocery store and there's a sale on like really high quality ice cream, the pints, go ahead and get maybe 3 different kinds of brands, and then come home to your family and do a blind tasting and see the difference from one vanilla to the other, because it's amazing just the whether the vanilla beans came from Madagascar or from another part of the world, or, you know, how many eggs or extract in it. So anyway, it's kind of a fun thing to do.
When you go out to an ice cream shop, do you choose vanilla or do you pick a flavor yourself?
I try to pick something that's really unique, because it's kind of like, you know, lemongrass. How many times are you going to get that? You know?
That's for sure. I'm not a big hard ice cream fan. I don't know what it is with, I'd have to eat it with a spoon. I don't like to lick it or bite into it. So I really like soft serve. So I'm a big twist fan with chocolate sprinkles. I get that all the time.
Like the texture.
We also have a local ice cream place here, and I think someone else will have to correct me or remind me, but I think they were voted, when Good Morning America does those polls or whatever, they were voted #1. But it's called Moomers, and the farm is right here, and they have right next to them is the shop, and they sell it all over town, and it's really, really good ice cream, and they have soft serve too.
Yeah. And that's even soft serve is regional, frozen custard is regional. I mean, we all have our loyalties to our area.
Right, exactly. Does anyone have any other questions she wants to ask Suzanne at all? You can unmute yourself if that's easier than typing. I know how that can take a little bit of time.
I'm guessing Moomers would have more traditional flavors.
Oh, well, they do like 150 flavors, and they do 20 every day, I think. Like 20 unique ones every day, if I remember correctly. Actually, I have their.
Awesome.
And then they do seasonal, or every season they'll do something where they have people vote on their favorite that will only be a temporary flavor. So that's always fun.
Like berries and pumpkin and that kind of thing. That's neat.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, Vicky asked, if you were to invent a flavor for the library based on a favorite book, what would it be?
What a great question.
She
Wow.
lives in the library too.
Yeah, what would you say? How would you answer that? Huh. That's going to take some thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe coffee, so you could stay up, you know, some kind of espresso, something or other, keep you up.
Yeah. Chocolate espresso when you're reading I don't know. Okay, I don't even know. A Rocky Road if you're reading some big mystery or something.
I love that though. I think expand the question, and you can almost say any book could be paired with ice cream. I mean, that's a great question.
It is. It would have to have chocolate letters in it. That's what she said.
Oh, fun. Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. This has been eye-opening for ice cream for sure, but it does make me hungry for some.
I did an event a while ago with a librarian in the Philadelphia area, and this man made this great comment where he said, you know, cake is good and candy is wonderful, but there's just something about ice cream. And he's so right. There's just something about it that really kind of just makes everybody happy. It's fun.
Yep. My in-laws make ice cream, or they used to, quite a bit. And I would love when they went away for the winter, because then they'd clean out their freezer and we got all their ice cream. It was nice.
Ice cream is really good.
Well, it was fun to meet everybody. I appreciate it. Loved your questions too.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you.
participating.
I am just